Hello to Professor Mike Martino. In español, Profesor Miguel Martino and students and estudiantes. Uh, it's a pleasure to have this opportunity to talk to your class, Mike. It's always an honor. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Jorge Bonet. I'm the founder of Pure Motion. My background started in athletics way back when I was 5, 6 years old. I'm going to get into that in a minute. But that was a big reason why I'm doing what I'm doing today. Now, in this presentation, um, I wanted to make it in a way that the information is pragmatic, that at the end of it, if you're going to spend an hour plus with me, at least I want you to take something home tonight. Okay. So the way I divide it is pretty simple. At the beginning, the first part is going to be a little bit about my bio. Okay. Because my bio is a huge reason why I'm doing what I'm doing today, which is my passion, it's my calling, is my legacy to you guys. Number two, um, my bio is what led me to explain and understand the existing strength and conditioning model, which I call the old playbook. Okay. And of course, if there is an old playbook, then there's got to be a new playbook. And that's what the pure motion methodology is all about. It's just a way to uh, give you a contrast. Because people ask me so many times, so what do you do? That's cool, but what is it? And at the beginning, it was very hard to find the words. And using the analogy of old playbook, new playbook, it hopefully will resonate for you guys as well. And that is the scope of this presentation. I'm not going to get into the specifics about program design, movement, specific movement patterns as relate to footprint, handprint, body alignment. I mean, if I do that, we'll be here till tomorrow morning and beyond, I promise. So let's go ahead and dig into it. So, in case you don't know, I am also a certified strength and conditioning specialist by the NSCA. And back in the early 1990s, actually late 1980s, beginning of the 90s, I mean, I was all about it. I ate this book. And this book might look the same as the one that maybe you guys use today. Just to give you an idea for how many decades we've been teaching the same topic, the book has not changed, but today we know better. I mean that I have gone through so many experiences, when I was an athlete, competing and or training in the gym, or even later, being a strength coach, that make me question that what's here may not be 100% correct. Let me give you a couple of examples. 1983, I was getting ready for my first of 5 Olympic Games. I am at the U.S. Olympic Training Center in Colorado Springs. Judokas, wrestlers, boxers, taekwondo guys. We were lifting weight. It was supposed to be a max squat day. And the coach made me do 415 pounds. I did it, and I feel something twitch in my lower back, and it hurt. And I was totally fine before that. So the coach was happy. I was pissed. I was pissed. And I looked at him and asked him with my broken English back then, Coach, why I need to do this? Well, because that's how you get strong. And I said, okay, but why I have to do the squat or back squat like so? Okay. He said, that's what's in the books. That's how you do it. And I said, are you still competing in powerlifting, coach? He said, yes. When is your next competition? He said, 2 weeks. And I said, see, you're the only one that do in the gym the same movement that you do on the platform. We don't. This movement has nothing to do with what I do in judo. At that point, he got so mad. I don't know why, because I was just asking questions and trying to understand why I was asked to do something that I could not relate to. And his reply was, "Get out of the gym and go to PT." And I said, "Oh, so I leave to PT with pain, but what you don't know is I have practice at 5 o'clock, and you hope that I will get better by then." Now you might be wondering, how I end up in judo, okay? And I'm going back a little bit, okay? I got exposed to judo back in 1971. I was 6 years old, and I was bullied. And my father thought that the best way to defend myself was to learn some kind of martial art. And there was nearby where we live, there was a judo dojo. So that's where everything started. And 6 months later, I was whipping ass. Well, me and my brothers, and it was fun, right? And from there we started competing. And by the time I was 11 years old, I thought I had enough. Only what 5 years in the sport. My brothers were quitting, so I said, "It's my time to quit." And I told my father, "Papi, I'm done. I'm quitting." And he said, "No." And I said, "¿Qué pasa? Why not?" And he said, "You are a little shit and you don't know what you want. So you're gonna do what I tell you to do." And I look at him, and the way he said it, the tone. Listen, when Poppy talked with that tone, you don't question anything. But I had one more question. And I said, Poppy, said, "Yes. When can I quit then?" And I said, "When you earn your black belt." So I started counting with my fingers, that, and I said, "Well, that's 5 years when I turned 16." And I said, "Well, let's be it. That's when you're gonna, you can decide by then." At 16 years old, I got my black belt. He looked at me, and I looked at him. We never said a word, but from mind to mind, I was telling him, till this day, I've been doing it for you. From this day forward, it's on me. My point is, during all this time, if I was not competing in judo, actually, and also wrestling, because if you are a judoka, okay, and wrestling coaches in school find out that you are a judoka, you have no option. You're going to wrestle, okay? But judo was always the main sport. So if I was not competing, I was in the gym training. And what I learned, when I was conditioning and lifting weight, which I started late at 15 years old, it was, the acceptable, uh, uh, you know, uh, free weightlifting program, which is based on bodybuilding, powerlifting, um, and Olympic lifting, which I didn't learn later, when I was getting into my 16, 17 years old. What I learned is that everything the book said about strength and conditioning and lifting weights and whatnot was true as relate to getting stronger. Check. Getting, gaining muscle size. Check. Getting endurance and stamina. Check, check. Okay. And eventually later on, I learned, also about explosive power with the Olympic lift. Check. But here was the problem. I was feeling stiff. I was feeling this aches and pain. I just gave you an example. Okay. And I thought that something was not right. So I asked questions. That's why they call me, Curious George. And the answer was always, well, that's, it's proven. It's all science based. All these exercises are proven that, you're going to get all these benefits. And I said, yeah, but what about these aches and pain that I'm? Well, that's you. It's your technique. You got to keep practicing. So I went along with the story. Even though I knew something was not right, I didn't have the answer. So I went along. Okay. So I went to the 1984 Olympic Games in judo, Los Angeles, the 88 Olympic Games against in judo in Seoul, Korea, and then I retired. And I thought I was fully retired. Okay. So 2 years later, at the gym in Puerto Rico, I was approached by one of my friends from track and field, and we were lifting, we were doing power cleans, and he mentioned about if I was interested in being part of the Puerto Rico bobsled team, if I want to go, to try out. And I said, listen, what is a bobsled? And he looked at me and I said, well, those toboggan, on the ice track up in the mountain. And I go like, it just doesn't ring a bell to me. So, um, but he insisted. And I asked him, I'm a judoka. I'm not into pushing a sled. That sounds like you have to go fast. And he said, I can teach you that. And I said, okay. So I went home and I told Papi, oh yeah, listen, this Liston, he want me to go to the French Alps and go down this bobsled. Papi, what's that? And he started laughing. He just started cracking up. I said, man, he's so full of it. And I said, I know. Guess what? 30 days later, I was in the French Alps and having no clue what to expect. And that day, I went down the track 4 times with zero experience. And 4 times we crashed. Crash meaning the sled turning upside down. I confess, that was the most scary day of my life. And even my teammates, they said, Jorge, you know what? We understand. If you don't want to keep doing it, we're not going to argue that. And I said, guys, listen, we are 3,500 miles away. All I'm going to ask you is one thing: just keep the damn sled upright, okay? And and we'll be fine. Well, I guess they listened because the rest, the remaining runs, we actually got it right. Now, one thing I want to share with you uh, that I learned through the bobsled years is when it comes to the training part. I learned how plastic the body is, meaning that how the body can adapt to the stress that you apply to. I go from being a grappler, where we push, pull, throw, choke, you name it. Okay, but everything is within a specific space. To go from that environment to be pretty much a sprinter, where you have to push this 500-pound sled with one other guy or three other guys and sprint 50 meter and get in that sled. Um, the requirements, the physical requirements are totally different. It's like day and night. And when Liston told me that I'll teach you how to sprint, I was shocked. How my body responded and how fast I became by training specifically for that particular task. So I read about it but never experienced it. Now I've never done this before on camera, but I'm going to share with you uh, some pieces that I kept, which is my uniform. Right? I'm going to start first with the 1994 Winter Olympic Games in Lillehammer, Norway. This is the actual uniform that I wear as a bobsledder for Puerto Rico. Okay, as you can see, this is like native from the Puerto Rican Indians or the native, design that you can find in the cave in Puerto Rico. Okay, and it's printed all over, all over the uniform. This is very light, guys. I mean, you put this on in temperatures in the teens, or even at 5 degrees or so. It just freezing. Um, this is the wrestling singlet that I wear in seventh grade. I was That was my first first experience as a wrestler. I was 105 pounds and I was wrestling varsity. So there was no option. They just wanted me to wrestle varsity, and I said, "What do I do?" My coach said, "You know how to throw, right?" I said, "Yes, sir." Just throw, and keep throwing until I tell you to stop. I said, "Yes, sir." And here I have one of my judo gis, specifically the one from the 1988 Olympic Games. So notice that on the back it says PUR. For all Puerto Rican athletes, this is what we wear. USA. United States USA, Japan JPN. But Puerto Rican is PUR. And so yes, this is part of the meaning of the word pure motion. If you look at here, where is it, Jimmy? You see right there? Right here, PUR. Okay, that's one of two meanings that the brand pure motion has. The other one is, well, if you take the P out, is you are motion. You are your own movement. So let's fast forward. Okay, I was in my 20s back then. As I was getting to my 30s, I kept working out. I was not into athletic anymore, and I started noticing that my aches and pain from working out was becoming more frequent. And I couldn't understand that because I was always under the impression that fitness or strength and conditioning is supposed to help you, not hurt you. How come this movement, especially barbell related movement like power cleans, snatches, back squat, bench press, that are the staple for strength and conditioning to get strong, size, and all that, we're causing all these aches and pain. And of course, you talk to the bros in the gym, and they'll tell you, "Man, you're getting older." And I go like, "That that's not an excuse. I mean, that's just mindset. That's kind of like you're telling me, well, that's the way it is." And it just didn't resonate to me. So at that point, and also with the accumulation of past experience, I realized that I found it my calling. And that was to find a better way, if there was, when it comes to fitness, strength and conditioning. Specifically, what I was trying to get at is how can I get strong, um, still have a nice physique, but also don't break down. In other words, how can I maintain or increase longevity? I want to have it all. Okay. I didn't want to have just strength and size and at the same time, dealing with, injuries or chronic injuries that were getting worse and worse. So when people ask me, "Jorge, when did you start a Pure Motion?" I said, "Well, uh, legally, the company was founded in 2009. But for me, Pure Motion started it way back in 1971. Okay? I was just exposed to all these experiences. Okay? And it wasn't until, I would say, 2004 that I started connecting the dots as a strength coach at a small baseball training facility in Montevallo, Alabama. Yeah, you're right. You don't know where that is. Its population is maybe 5,000. Okay, but that was the place where I spent about 2 or 3 years, really researching. And don't think research, or let me put it this way: the research that you think I was doing, that's not it. It's not the one in a traditional lab with all these machines, wired. No, I'm talking about digging into movements by feeling those movements. Judo gave me the knowledge of applied biomechanics. okay, uh, on how to move the body in order to throw somebody, using a violent, powerful movement of a living target, somebody that is moving, and you gotta time it at the right time. So when you perform a throwing movement, which is 100% joint friendly, otherwise you're gonna lose a shoulder, an elbow, something's gonna break. Okay, but the technique are so flawless, and what I mean by that, in terms of I'm talking about joint friendly, that that experience with lifting dead weight in the gym, putting those two together some way, somehow, that's what I was doing. That's what I did. So I was putting together movement patterns, specifically, push pattern, pulling, rotational patterns, squat patterns, where they were, the number one requirement back then was that it needed to be 100% joint friendly. Okay, I was still under the movement in the three planes of motion, sagittal, frontal, transverse. That was working okay until I realized that what, a push-up is sagittal. Okay, but if I do a jammer, like right here, if I do a jammer press, that's still sagittal. So how can I differentiate those two in a program? Well, that's when I started looking into force vectors. Okay. Also, when it comes to rotational movements, okay, I was performing at the beginning like everybody else, either the Russian twist or the ground-based choppers, right? Well, those are transverse, movement or movement in the transverse plane, right? But how do I differentiate, let's say, the horizontal chopper, and this chopper variation? Okay, both are are rotational movement, but how you differentiate one from the other so that you can properly prescribe it in a exercise program, okay, uh, and justify it. So I went back to force vectors, but the force vectors, they're two kinds. There's linear and angular. Okay. Later, I'm going to be teaching you, I'm going to dig into force vectors as relate to linear and angular to better differentiate movement patterns, okay, that are joint friendly, but it can also help you make sure that you have a program design that has no gaps. That was my other challenge, okay? Not only was, I was developing joint friendly movement, because remember, I said I want to look good, perform good, and live longer, increase longevity. Okay, so movement needed to be joint friendly. Okay, I was also looking at different loads. Okay, why is it that we have to do all bilateral? Why not unilateral? Why not alternating? Why not a combination of all three? Okay, so in the other, you know, area that I was investigating on my own was lines of resistance. Okay, um, you know, is it all vertical? Why not horizontal? Why not diagonal? Why not angular? Angular besides this horizontal plane. Why not vertical? Why not lateral? See, in my mind, I was trying to find a way of a fitness model that leave no gaps, and that it also needed to be practical. And practical means easy to teach and easy to learn. And the best way to do that these days is not with just text, visuals. And when it comes to visuals, specifically mathematics, from geometry, trigonometry, using shapes and formula that can help you better understand, what are the movement that matters? What are the best piece of equipment or tools, attachment that I need in order to put together a comprehensive strength and conditioning program? So the more I dig into this journey, not knowing exactly where it was going to take me, I started questioning even the basis of strength and conditioning, even the definition of what strength and conditioning meant, what fitness really is. What is the actual definition of it? And everything that I read in the literature, honestly, didn't really convince me. So I started a journey on my own by trying to define fitness and also define, like what is the purpose of the human body and what are the movements that really matters in the gym that can give me the highest transfer to the field or whatever physical task I was training for. So I started reading. I started reading about, fitness, different fitness topics of strength and conditioning, general topic that, try to define what general strength and conditioning was. And most of the literature that I was reading was in the last 50, 60 years. So, nothing really convinced me. So I went back in history, like way back in history. Okay, I started reading a little bit about the ancient empires. The first Chinese empire, how they did things. Because I mean, that empire lasted for thousands of years. With Emperor Qi. Okay, I don't know if you ever been in Xi'an, China, where they have the terracotta soldiers. You need to look into that. I went there. It was a fascinating experience. I mean, it really humbles you, especially about the technology that they had back then. But I also, look into the Greeks, the Romans, the Maya, the Aztec, even the Spaniards, you know, and even though some of these, empires, even the Egyptians, I won't forget, uh, a lot of these empires, some they met and fought for years in deadly wars, and some never even met. The Chinese didn't know about the existence of the Mayas, and vice versa. But at one point, it hit me. I found some common denominators that explain why these empires were so successful. Okay? And these common denominators relate to physical work. All these empires were superior when it comes to lifting, fighting, sprinting, dancing. Yeah, you heard right, dancing. Okay? Lifting, not uh, bumper plates, not these bumper plates, and a barbell doing back squat, barbell deadlift, and barbell bench press, and blah blah blah. They were lifting heavy construction materials to lift building, bridges, castles, roads, pyramids. So there was a purpose in the way they lived. Okay, fighting, the equipment, armament, and movement that they perform to win, at war, regardless if we know it or not, needed to be also superior because they won so many battles for so many hundreds and some thousands of years. Okay, that fighting was also a requirement, just like lifting, for the success of the empire. Sprinting means more mobilization of, let's say, the army, or the armed forces to move from point A to point B for battle or for the people to escape or to move to a new territory. Okay? So sprinting slash locomotion It was also a physical requirement, okay, to perform specific physical tasks. In dancing, um, well, once you were successful in any of the first three, lifting, fighting, sprinting, you celebrate. You celebrate what? Victory. But that was also, part of the celebration was to also find your mate because the empire needed to replenish the inventory of the man that goes that defend the empire and the people. Okay, but for us, dancing is nothing else that uh, agility and quickness. Okay, change of direction. Okay, that's what uh, that's pretty much what dancing means. So for me, that was the aha moment. That was the moment that I felt that that I was able to put it all together and give meaning to you know what the human body actually evolved to in terms of uh, the physical attributes, the way we look. We were designed to do those four foundational physical tasks, not like in contrast the old, what I call the old playbook, which is the existing strength and conditioning model, where uh, the training modalities that it's being used are not related. We're talking about powerlifting, bodybuilding, Olympic lifting, gymnastics. I can keep mentioning, but these are training modality or sports that are not related. And those training modality or sports, it was not their concern to define or enhance athletic performance, strength and conditioning, or fitness. Their goal was to win. That's it. It's to win. Okay? And yes, they have movement or techniques to achieve those goals, but not necessarily longevity was a top priority. Yeah, you call it, you have to keep it safe, of course, but that was not, a high priority, and it's still not today. Okay? But strength and conditioning coaches and even football coaches back in the 70s, they recognized and they were right that their kids needed to get strong. So what we did, we copy paste. What do you mean, Jorge? Coaches look at power lifters or weightlifters. They look big, they look explosive, right? I mean, you don't need science to say, well, if they look big by doing that, I'm going to have my kids do that too. Copy paste. Okay, and that's what they knew best. There was no sports science, high level technology, nothing. Okay, I think the movie of Draco and Rocky Balboa, it was just came out, and that's the beginning actually. That's the root for sports science. Okay, that's another story. So the coaches also realized that the kids needed to get big. So what they did, you're right, they went out, and they looked at bodybuilders. Man, those guys look huge. So they're doing that. That should benefit also our kids. Copy paste. Okay. So we just keep adding. Okay. So what happened? The kids were getting strong, explosive, and big. But man, they're getting a little stiff. A little some achiness here and there. So what are we gonna do? Well, who is good with aches and pain and stiffness? Man, the yogi, Pilates, and physical therapists. Okay, let's go and get them. And you're right. Copy, paste. So the strength and conditioning model, okay, that started about 40, 50 years ago is a copy paste model. And when you copy paste, you're going to copy the good and the bad. Look at this model here. Okay, is a summary of what I just said. Okay, Look at each training modality as the piece of the puzzle. Okay, and as much as you want to put it together, that puzzle still have gaps, and those gaps represent collateral damage or side effects. Okay, so what we have done in the conventional model, again, I call it the old playbook. What do we do in the old playbook? Well, when you get those aches and pains, okay, you go and get treated. Where? Well, to the clinician. And what the clinician is going to do? Well, he or she is going to treat the symptoms. Okay? And once you feel better, what you do? Yes, you go back. You go back and do the same exercises, okay, or program that created those collateral damage. I mean, at the beginning, you might think it's normal. Well, that's the way it is. Just a little soreness in my joint and whatnot. So this this circle, okay, you train, collateral damage, treat the symptoms, and go back. Okay, imagine this circle that is kind of big. It takes longer to complete, right? But you keep doing it. Okay, you keep doing it. The side effect, that collateral damage, is already there. It's there. All you're doing is treating the symptom. You haven't treated the cause. So that circle, imagine, getting smaller and smaller, meaning that the problem gets compounded. Okay, that joint keep degenerating and keep it faster and faster, and then the physical therapist tells you, Jorge, yes, sir, yes, ma'am, you're ready. I'm ready for what? You're ready to see the orthopedic. I think you're a candidate for surgery now. How would you feel if somebody tells you that? And then when you say why, and then what I hear is, well, that's the way it is, normal wear and tear. Excuse my French, but for me, that's bullshit. If I was doing a non-fitness program, a non-strength and conditioning program, okay, I get it. But fitness is supposed to help you, not hurt you. But think about this. Instead of settling to the argument, well, that's the way it is. That's how the model works. How about if we think, no, that's not the way it is. There's got to be a better way. Okay. There's something is happening in the conventional strength and conditioning model in this puzzle here, okay, in those gaps that is causing the problem. And guess what? That's the case. That the problem is right there. At what level? At multiple levels or multiple gaps. Gap number one, the movement itself being used in this model are not sustainable, are not 100%. Listen to me, 100% joint friendly. If the movement is not 100% joint friendly, you are not. You are not going to be able to, or your body will not going to be able to stay healthy, okay, throughout your life. Okay, not much of a difference, of not exercising and sitting all day long, every day. You're going to cripple, but you're also crippling if you do it this way. Okay, it's just a different way of getting crippled. But if you find joint friendly movement, okay, that you can do with your own body weight, but also using or adding external loads without breaking you down, then you eliminate or reduce the potential of collateral damage. And if you reduce the potential collateral damage, guess what? You don't go from here to the clinician. You eliminate that. Okay? Let's add another layer. What about if you balance? You know, the the concept of loading as relate to bilateral, unilateral, and alternating. Okay, the conventional model for many years used to be uh, bilateral bias. You know, it was bilateral loading was, and still for the most part today, overrated. Okay, over the years, I think we've done a better job to leverage, this bilateral loading with unilateral loading, which is a step in the right direction. Okay, the area that I believe that we can also make huge improvements is in the direction that we are projecting our bodies when we train. Okay, not only going vertical or horizontal. Okay, there are infinite ways that you can project your body, either using your own body weight or using external load. And the fourth area to look into is intensity. Okay, the conventional model it's very biased towards uh, heavy lifting. You know, if you want to gain a lot of mass, or actually I would say if you want to gain a lot of strength, you have to spend week to week to week working at high loads or sub maxes, for low reps and low sets. Okay, uh, and and for me, yeah, that may apply for individuals that want to, let's say play, or be powerlifters and or Olympic lifters. But if I am not a non-weightlifter, I'm an athlete or I'm a tactical individual. Do I really need to perform week to week to week at that level of intensity? The short answer is no, you don't. You have so many training variables to achieve your genetic potential. So looking at all this information that I was accumulating, I finally got to the point that I said, okay, the new playbook must be made up of joint friendly movements where you can perform varied loads, varied lines of resistance at very intensity. Okay. Now, how that model was going to look like, that was the next challenge. But I also knew that this model, one of the top requirements was that it, it needed to eliminate the gaps. Remember the gaps from the conventional model that I shared with you? Okay. The pure motion model needed to eliminate those gaps. And before I forget, and these days I'm forgetting a lot of stuff, let me share with you pure motion definition of fitness, which is to increase purpose-based physical work capacity using joint-friendly movements at varied loads, lines of resistance, and intensities in order to increase either your physique, getting big, your performance, and or your longevity. See, most people when they get into a fitness program, their goal, is somewhere between those three goals. You know, physique, performance, or longevity. Usually, when you are younger, you care much about the first two, how you look and or how you perform. And then as we get older, like me, things change. Okay, we want to live longer, pain free. So longevity, becomes a priority. But don't get me wrong, old bears like me still want to look good and perform good. Okay, the idea is to keep those three goals, moving along. Okay, throughout your life. So defining fitness this way, it really gives you the tools to make sure that you leave no gaps. So let's go over how I built the pure motion model. The first criteria that I looked into was movement pattern. Okay, what kind of movement? Natural, foundational movement, push, pull, rotation, level changes or squat patterns is another way of saying it. Locomotive or gait uh, patterns and complexes, okay, which is a combination of the first five movements that I shared with you. The second criteria was regarding loads. Okay, I wanted to leverage back then excessive bilateral loading with unilateral loading and alternating loading. The third criteria was force line or force vector, which is how I project my body, specifically the direction. Okay, the other component of force line or force vector is magnitude, which is related to load. But I was more concerned about the direction. And the fourth component relates to intensity, meaning from moving from light to heavy or slow to fast and anything in between. So in this presentation, you're going to see, I would say, the first three. Okay? You're going to see movements or joint-friendly movements, and I'm going to be demonstrated, varied loads. But I want you to pay attention on the third criteria, which is force line or force vectors. Because force vectors is one of the most underrated training variables used today in the strength and conditioning world. I mean, in a true need analysis, force vector should be at the top priority, not including or incorporating force vectors in a need analysis is like shooting in the dark. For educational purpose, I'm going to divide the body into three parts: upper extremity, trunk, and lower extremity. As relate to upper extremity, we know that the basic function of your arms is to push and pull. Okay, but the direction of how you push pull can vary. We have identified five force lines that you can push and pull. Okay, now the direction of the force line is a function of where my arm is. Okay, as related to the shoulder. Okay, the first force line is vertical. Okay, that means my arm is above my shoulder. Okay, and when my arm is above my shoulder, I can perform an ascending vertical push or a descending vertical pull. Let's go ahead and show you some sample exercises, by using bilateral and unilateral loads. The second force line is horizontal, okay? Meaning that you can push horizontally, but you can also pull. Here are some demonstrations using bilateral and unilateral horizontal pushing and pulling movement. The next force line is vertical descending push and vertical ascending pull. Okay, notice my arm is below the shoulder. Let's go ahead and demonstrate some examples. The fourth force line is the diagonal ascending force line. Okay, when I can push in a diagonal ascending line, but I can also pull in a diagonal high low descending line. Okay, but it's related to this force line. Okay, now you're going to watch some examples. The fifth force line is the diagonal descending. Okay, where you can push in this diagonal direction. Okay, it's descending, but you can do a diagonal ascending pull. So by now you can understand that by just, let's say, pushing and pulling horizontal or vertical, it doesn't tell the whole story. There's more to it. And we use force line to demonstrate that. So that is an example of how you can, eliminate gaps. And you also learn with all these examples is that you can also eliminate gaps by making sure the movements are joint friendly. And also, having this mix of bilateral, unilateral, and alternating loads. When it comes to force lines, as related to your lower extremity, we recognize four. Okay, number one is the vertical force line or gravity-based force line that is commonly known. For me, is way overrated, but it exists and it should be trained. I'm going to show you some vertical lower extremity force line, mainly squat pattern, using the hex bar or the dual renegade bars. But again, if you want to do more traditional squat patterns on the load, I strongly recommend to keep it joint friendly, the safety squat bar, the hex bar, the DRB, any implement that will make the movement joint friendly. The second lower body force line is the forward diagonal line. Okay, this forward diagonal line means squat pattern with forward intent. Okay, think about a sprinter coming out of the block. Okay, think about the lineman. Okay, when the ball is snapped and perform that triple extension with forward intent. So the question is, can we perform the squat patterns in an angle that resemble that forward intent? Yes, we can. Okay, the squat just vertical. That's just part of the story. Okay, but performing angle squat is it's a squat pattern that can be loaded in the weight room. Okay, an example could be, you already know it, is pushing a sled, even though it's locomotive, but is diagonal with forward intent. And we have all the implements. There's so many options, okay, that are going to be demonstrated, with different implements that are pure motion exclusive tools or non-pure motion exclusive tools. Take a look. The third lower body force line is the backward diagonal force line. So it's the opposite of the forward diagonal force line. For instance, backpedaling. Okay, that's an example. Okay, using just your own body. Dragging a sled is backward diagonal force line. Okay, you're gonna see in a minute some angled squat patterns. Where I'm, I'm in that backward diagonal angle. The main difference between the back diagonal force line and the forward is your feet. Okay, when you're performing forward action, you're going to be pretty much on the ball of your feet. Okay, that's what gives you that forward intent. Okay, but if I'm performing, let's say, an backward or a backward angle squat, my feet is going to be flat, toes to heel, which you're about to see. And the fourth lower body force line is what I call the lateral force line. It's diagonal, okay? It's diagonal, but it's lateral, okay? It's like this way. It's like I'm pushing up lateral, like right there. See that? That motion right there, okay? I'm pushing up laterally, okay? But it's still diagonal, okay? So in summary, you got see you got the vertical, okay, which you have a 90-degree angle here. That's neutral, okay. Then you have your forward intent, diagonal forward, diagonal backward, and diagonal lateral. Let me give you some examples of movement patterns that we load using that force line. As relate to the trunk, we focus on rotational movement patterns. Okay, yes, there are anti-rotational movement patterns, but for this presentation, I want to talk about the actual rotation. And when it comes to rotation, we recognize five rotational angles that we call orbits. Okay, the first orbit is the horizontal orbit. Okay, you might recall, for instance, the chopper, right? The chopper represents that horizontal orbit. And the idea is to strengthen that horizontal orbit or any of the five orbits in both directions. The other criteria is if you're going to be training a specific orbit like the horizontal, make sure that you pick the right force line or line of resistance so you train throughout that specific orbit. Okay? So there's no point, and I've been seeing this for years. People want to train the horizontal orbit, but they pick the wrong implement. Okay, for instance, either a medicine ball or a bumper plate, and they want to do, you know, horizontal rotational movement. Um, it looks good on camera, and you think you are training your core, but at a slow speed, you're not. All you're doing is you're training your shoulders. Why? Because the bumper plate is acting, or the weight of the bumper plate is downward. See, it's going this way. So it's the shoulder that is actually working. Your oblique, your serratus is doing nothing. They're sleeping there. They say, "What are you doing, buddy?" I don't feel anything. Okay. So the intent of training the horizontal orbit is correct, but the implement is correct. I mean, it's incorrect. Okay. So I'm going to be showing, you're about to see some example of how we load how we load the horizontal orbit so you can maximize the muscle fibers responsible, you know, to move in that direction, which is again your obliques and your serratus and transverse abdominis. The second orbit is the diagonal orbit, performed on the right side and left side. Okay, the idea is to strengthen, the musculature or your core muscles both ways, in the accelerating component and the decelerating component. Okay, the diagonal orbit, I also call it the throwing orbit. And also pay attention about the attachments or tools that we use, how we place the anchor point to maximize the angular turn of those diagonal orbits, okay? And also the footprint, that is usually a split stance, okay? And again, this is a whole new topic, but I want you to be aware, that every little thing counts. So we already covered the horizontal, diagonal orbit, which is left and right. So I would say the fourth one is your lateral orbit. Okay, the perfect example to understand lateral orbit is the golf swing. Okay, this movement here. Okay, that's kind of like give people a visual of what I'm talking about. So the lateral orbit, just like the horizontal and the diagonal orbits, they all have something in common. Okay, in order to perform those rotational movements, okay, um, the common denominator is that there's always going to be a pull and a push. Okay, every time you have pull push, you have rotation. Okay, and that is consistent with those four orbits. Let's go ahead and show you some of the lateral orbits that we do via field motion. And the fifth orbit is the vertical orbit. This is the only orbit that you're either going to pull or push. There's no push-pull to create rotation. Think about a sit-up. Think about an inch one. Think about leg raises. Okay, you're gonna see on the screen pretty soon. See, it's a vertical orbit. Okay, but there's, I'm pulling on all those examples. Okay, there's no real rotation. All right, but we incorporate that vertical orbit as part of, the five orbits that we recognize at pure motion because it's all trunk related. So let's go ahead and watch some of the movements that are perfect example of the vertical orbit. Now let's put it all together because this is where the fun really is. Okay. I'm just so far, all I have done is to, build the foundation to this moment. Okay. This is the part that I want you to take home with you. Okay. So I'm going to use a mathematical linear equation to explain what I have been talking about for who knows how long, maybe an hour. Okay, are you ready for this? Here we go. And poof, that is the pure motion vector model formula. Notice that I'm using a mathematical linear equation with three variables. All right, the first variable, like I already explained, is the upper extremity force line. Okay, vertical, diagonal ascending, horizontal, diagonal descending, and vertical descending. Okay, then we add the lower extremity force line, vertical, diagonal, forward, backward, and lateral. Okay, then we add the five orbits, the vertical, lateral, both diagonals, and the horizontal. So at the end, when I add it all together, you have the model at the end. Basically, what I'm trying to explain is that the whole body works as one unit. Movement, load, direction, it's all related. Now, this vector model formula is still not 100% complete as related to the pure motion model. Okay, all I have done is to explain the quality of movement, load, and direction. We're still missing another component, and that is intensity. So now we have to take the vector model linear equation and add intensity. Are you wondering how that look like? Me too. Let's find out. Jimmy, shoot. Boom. As you can see, all I have done is added the force velocity curve or the power formula, which is what I use to describe or explain intensity, okay? Which is represented by the letter E at the end of the formula. So now that I have shared with you how we define movement, load, direction, and then bring in the intensity factor into the whole equation, we are ready to put together the pure motion model. Are you curious how that looks like? Hmm, me too. Jimmy, throw something on the wall. Boom. So notice in the center of this model, where you see all these orbits and the letter E, it all symbolizes, the linear equation that I explained to you earlier. Because the movement that we do, the way we load, the direction, and at the intensity that we work supports the four foundational physical tasks, which are lifting, fighting, sprinting, and dancing. But it also applies for the three fitness goals that people pursue knowingly or not to improve their physique, their performance, or increase their longevity. Let's look at the old playbook model and the Pure Motion new playbook model. And you can see it is clear a fundamental difference. Gaps in the old playbook model and no gap in the new playbook model. The reason for the gap is because it's a model that was built from the outside in by copy pasting. In other words, it is a reactive model. So that makes the old playbook model unsustainable. In contrast, the pure motion model is proactive, built from the inside out. It is a model that actually explains the foundational physical tasks and the movement that supports those physical tasks, making this model 100% sustainable. I have an announcement. We are done. Yeah! Seriously, thank you for putting on with me for an hour. I hope this presentation was educational. Honestly, this is just the tip of the iceberg. I mean, trying to share with you 1 hour what I do in regular courses or seminars. It can go from 8 hours to 16 hours. Even my field motion coaches that I have taken under my wing, they stay with me a year, up to 5 years. So it's a lot of information, that I'm trying to compress in this short time. Take this presentation as an opportunity that is being presented to you, and it's up to you to take it or not. It's a choice. So if you ever want to know more, yes, you can check us online, puremotion.net. We are all social medias. I believe YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook. I don't know how to deal with Twitter or LinkedIn. I mean, maybe someday. So thank you so much for your time. God bless you and get stronger.